Tonight, we tell you about a couple of great events coming to Baton Rouge. I'll introduce you to someone who has turned his past into great purpose. We honor the fallen, and we talk about mental health. Roll it, Scott. It is a subject for years across this country people just did not want to talk about. The status of our mental health. Going all the way back to 1949, in America, we have designated this time as Mental Health Awareness Month, and I am so pleased to be talking tonight with Dr. Brian Benson, who is our guest for segment number 1 to talk about Mental Health Awareness Month. We were talking before we started the show that you were here about 3 weeks ago, and I said, I'll have you back. You didn't think it was going to happen this fast, right?
And I thank you. Yes, sir.
Well, let's get into it, man. I said it in the open. For a long time, it was a thing people didn't talk about. If you were having mental health issues, you suppressed it. You hid it at the bottom of a bottle or at the end of a joint or some other stuff. But now people seem to be more comfortable talking about having issues or not being okay. What created that?
Yeah, working with the stigma has been challenging because still to date, only about half of people pursue seeking medical care for symptoms pertaining to a mental health issue. But we are trying to get out there and have the conversation about having any kind of symptoms related to depression or anxiety or any personality issues or anything else for that matter. It doesn't reflect on a weakness or a flaw of our own, but it's just a state of the human condition.
What is the most dangerous thing a person can do if they suspect they're having some issues or if they just don't feel okay?
Well, that's an interesting question because having a mental health illness, particularly depression, clouds our judgment and absolves our logic. And so when someone's contemplating suicide, it seems like a viable option. It seems like the only thing left to do in that state of mind, but they're not thinking clearly. So the most dangerous thing would be not reaching out to somebody, reaching out for help.
The importance of having a support group around you cannot be understated. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, just before this segment, we were talking about that a little bit. We used to interact with our friends, family, neighbors more often. Now we're so busy. We're lucky to get a text in, and then we're actually hiring somebody to talk to. We're paying them for therapy, talk therapy of some sort. So that's one thing we can do is be sure to engage that social network, our friends, family, whoever it is that we pick up a phone and call on our worst day. We've got to stay connected with those folks. We've got to reach out to others who might be hurting. We've got to stay connected. We're social beings.
I really believe in being intentional about who I'm around in non-business settings. I mean, work is work, but I think that real estate in a day is, I have to be so intentional about being careful, either knowing what I'm going to deal with when I'm going into it or avoiding it all together, because otherwise, man, you'll find yourself off equilibrium, right? Talk about that.
Well, I'd call that mental hygiene.
Mental hygiene.
You've basically summed up, there are certain parts of our lives that are essential to us living that balance, right? And that might be, for some folks, it's spirituality, right? They're getting into church on a regular basis. They've got names and numbers of folks in their congregation. For others, it might be exercise. Exercise releases those endorphins. Those are the ones that mask pain and make you pick your mood up. And then others, it could be getting out in nature or something like that, being with a loved one. So those things are critical, and some of us lack, for example, with the disease of depression, some of us lack good mental balance and coping skills. So we might be doing okay until something happens, and then all of a sudden.
I also believe in keeping a steady diet of not being on social media.
Oh, boy.
It seems to, I always call it a cesspool of misinformation anyway, but it is affecting, especially children, it's affecting their view of self and their view of the world. So how would you advise a reasonable engagement with social media?
Yeah, it's becoming a disease of its own.
Yeah.
Gaming, video games is also on the list now of mental health illnesses. So it has to be done in moderation. I can real simply say, as a physician, I don't have a Facebook account, which is the honest to goodness truth. Because you know what, patients could contact, it could get really complicated, right? But others have, for part of their job, they have to be plugged in, but it has to be done in moderation. You have to have time to shut the phone off, put it away, and then, you know, my wife calls Facebook fake book, because people sort of show their best. You know, it's unrealistic, some of what you see there, and then we're comparing ourselves, and I think it's potentially harmful. It's nice to connect with folks, but the right
I could
way.
do a whole segment just about that fake book, huh? Tell her I'm gonna borrow that for her just for a little while.
Will
all right?
do.
If people want to get more information, if they're looking for assistance, who can they call?
Well, obviously, reach out to your primary care doctor. Those are the doctors that provide the most mental health services, psychiatric services by a physician, or counselors, psychologists, and licensed clinical social workers will help. My name is Dr. Brian Benson. My clinic is Salubre Care, and if you look us up online at salubrecare.com, we'd be glad to see how we can help out.
Thank you, Doc. I appreciate you coming in, man.
Glad to be here.
Coming up next, we'll talk about National Police Week. It's taking place next week across the country, but specifically in Washington, D.C. Gino is in the house next. And that was great.